Gotcha. When you're working with a patient, again, back then, what were you doing? Like, are you feeding these people, like actually getting them the food from the cafeteria, or are you talking to them? Are you giving them meal plans? Like, what does your actual work look like back then?
So not actually giving them the meals, but choosing the diet. And of course, the diets are limited to what the facility offers, right? So a diabetic diet has all the typical sugar-free stuff and the 30 to 45 grams of carbohydrates per day, because that's what the recommendation is, or not per day, per meal,
Per
sorry.
meal.
30
Got
to
it.
45 grams of carbohydrates per meal. The sugar-free stuff, a lot of lower fat stuff. So those menus are really controlled by dietitians oversee the menus, but they're controlled by the kitchen manager, who's controlled by the budget, and and of course controlled by the diets, the dietary guidelines, basically the USDA dietary guidelines for healthy Americans that sort of control the different institutional food systems. So not a lot, really able to change the food too much. I can individualize, like if someone has food preferences, I can change things out. I can sort of make little changes, but in that sort of period of my life, it was very inside the box, able to individualize a little bit where I could, but really not able to go outside the menu that was planned and the guidelines that it was following.
Okay, so we've already mentioned this in this conversation that you're very scientifically minded, and I seem to recall in our first conversation that you did learn human biology. Like they did teach you the way things work.
Yeah.
Was there any kind of like cognitive dissonance of like, well, I've learned this about what type 2 diabetes is, but then we're also giving them this many carbohydrates per meal. Like when did that start to occur to you that like does this make sense?
Mm. So it didn't right away. I didn't right away, I think, because I was just maybe doing my job.
Right.
Or, yeah, just doing my job. I know some dietitians, I think it did hit them right away. And then others, of course, like um are still practicing that way. So I guess there's a big variety there. Um, I think it wasn't until after just my personal health journey and seeing what I went through and what I was able to learn about food through that. And then definitely my first job in, we'll call it the field of metabolic health, or it was particularly a medical weight loss practice where they were using lower carb ketogenic diets in the prevention and reversal of obesity, type 2 diabetes. We also worked with patients with type 1 diabetes to get their diabetes under better control, to lose weight. So that job really, like I got into that job and it was like, wow, yes, like this is what I know how to do. And it all sort of clicked.
Yeah, wow, that would be a totally different job experience and job satisfaction between those two things. Let's do jump back to your own personal health
Sure.
journey and the time that, what was it like to hear about a ketogenic diet? Did you learn anything about ketogenic diets when you were in school? Had you heard about it on the cover of a magazine at the supermarket? How did you first learn about it? And what did you think when you first heard what the diet actually was?
So I first heard about it actually in college, but it was one day out of like one class, right? Out of one course, out of the whole thing. So just this one little instance. But I'll mention it because it was really impactful and I remembered it. It was a professor in a course called Nutrition Through the Life Cycles. And she had someone she knew come in to tell us about her journey with her son who had epilepsy. And the epilepsy was treatment resistant to medications, and she put him on a ketogenic diet. And so she told us his story and everything that she did. Like she would go to McDonald's and order the box and the toy and put together this high fat meal for him with hot dogs and butter. But he could get the same box as his friends and the same toys as friends. Like I remember these details from, oh my goodness, 18 years ago. I think I took that that class. So it tells you how like impactful it was and how I remembered it and the impact of it. But I didn't, man, in terms of hearing the first word of ketogenic diet, I guess it was in that first job that I had working in the field of metabolic health. When I was like changing my own diet, I did it for what I was, for my microbiome, right? For what I learned, what I read about gut dysbiosis and different overgrowths of bacteria. And I didn't come across the word ketogenic, which is just like really funny. I use my own education to say, well, if I'm eating less carbs, I need to eat more fat. So I increased the fat in my diet, kept the base of the animal protein that I already had there, and just cut the carbs. But yeah, it would definitely be in that first job I had is when I started using the word ketogenic and working with the diets with patients.
That experience at school is so interesting for two reasons to me. One is that it's a diet that's completely unconventional, like a woman talking about going to McDonald's and burger patties and hot dogs. Like that's probably the opposite of anything you learned was really healthy in the diet to begin with. But also, I think it's interesting to the fact that had you it had many thoughts that like diets can be so transformative. Any diet can be transformative for like really severe health conditions. It seems like a lot of the training for dietitians is more like weight control kinds of things, and doesn't really make an impact on a lot of like chronic conditions. Did you seem to recall it was interesting for that reason as well?
Oh, definitely. Right. And a lot of it is looking at it through the lens of calories, right? When you say weight management, weight loss, like we're taught calories in, calories out, we're taught that sort of thing. And looking at all food is the same in a way, like there was definitely that sort of lens over it. But there's also that foundational teaching that you mentioned, like the science courses that I mentioned, right? Like we do take biochemistry and also nutritional biochemistry. So how macronutrients and micronutrients are processed and used in the body, and everything, anatomy, physiology, and chemistry, all those courses. So I think that for me, and I'd love to hear what other dietitians like experienced in their sort of like transformation over from, we'll say being a typical trained dietitian, I guess that's the best way to put it, in terms of following the My Plate or the food pyramid, right? The 6 to 11 servings of grains per day, and lots of vegetables, lots of fruit, lower fat, only do a little red meat, like that sort of guidelines, how they transitioned over. I'd be interested to hear. For me, it wasn't, it didn't feel like a monumental shift from like one to the other. It didn't feel like, wow, this is like a crazy flip turn. It came a little bit more naturally to me because it all made sense. And I think it was that it all made sense in terms of what I learned about protein and fat. And I even wrote down a quote from one of my textbooks for you about saturated fat in the body, which I would love to read to you if you'd like me to. But I
Please.
think, sure, I'll jump in. I thought it was really interesting. I was thinking about saturated fat this morning and how I was thinking, was I taught that it was bad? Like I'm trying to remember, right? It's been a long time. I know it's not bad for human health. I know it's healthy for human health. I know our body fat is composed of saturated fat and a combination, right, with some monounsaturated fat. And so I went looking and I found this great quote from the textbook. And I'll read it. It says, because fatty acids with double bonds are vulnerable to oxidative damage, humans and other warm-blooded organisms store fat predominantly as saturated palmitic acid and stearic fatty acids. And it's like, there it is. Like, it's one of many examples of things. We also learned like cholesterol is essential for the body. Humans manufacture cholesterol. So like all of these, we manufacture because it's essential, right? So all of these things are here. And I thought like, wow, like, how far of a stretches it for the mainstream healthcare provider, the mainstream dietitian, for us to be afraid of saturated fat when we know, like the science we've known for a long time, saturated fat is not only healthy for humans, it's the preferred storage form of fat because it's more stable and less likely to cause issues for us, less likely to cause oxidative damage and inflammation.